Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mental Melodies. This is episode 4. That's actually kind of crazy. I'm just really grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that you're here listening and watching. It's been just a really, really cool journey going from one episode to the next. It's really helped open my eyes to a lot of things. I have a really cool song planned for you for the end of this episode, so look forward to that. If you're just tuning in, I'm just going to give you a little recap on who I am and why I'm here and kind of what I've been talking about the last few weeks. So my name is Carmynn Bradley. If you want to look me up to figure out who I am, Instagram is the best place right now. I'm in the process of making a website, but Instagram will tell you it all. I'm a singer, songwriter mainly, and I've been focusing on that lately. But I'm also an actress and a model and a comedian. So those are some other things that I dabble in. Like I said, I am focusing on music right now, and that's been kind of a lesson that I've learned through this show, actually, in the creation of this show, just learning how to really focus on one thing at a time. So, like I said, I'm going to give you a recap of the show. The show is called Mental Melodies. It's about mental health. It's also about music. So I use music to heal, and my plan right now is to kind of let the show unfold. And as it's unfolding, what I'm noticing is that the songs that I'm writing are related to the themes that I'm talking about. So I hope that as you listen and as you tune in, you can start to get some ideas maybe on how to heal, or maybe it'll just be cathartic for you. And I think that's really cool. I've always been really, really passionate about mental health. I've had my own issues, which I've shared in the last few weeks, but I also know a lot of people who've struggled with mental health, and it always surprises me how unaware a lot of people are. When I worked as a therapist, I worked as a therapist for a couple years after working as a teacher. I was just amazed when I would hear people say, oh, my parents don't want me to go to therapy, or I don't believe in therapy, or therapy is only for crazy people, that kind of thing. Because when you're in the world, it's almost like you take it for granted. So I just assumed once you start meeting people that are going to therapy and meeting other therapists that everybody wants to talk about their issues, delve into their childhood traumas, and that simply isn't true. And so I think part of my mission is to maybe alleviate a little bit of that fear that people have of uncovering their childhood trauma, breaking generational traumas, those sorts of things. Again, it seems to me like those are just buzzwords that are going around, and maybe everybody knows about them, but I also know that that isn't true. And that helps to, I guess, alleviate my doubt of why should I be able to be sitting here talking about these things. I can spout off my resume to you, and that might sound nice, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard to accept that you have authority on a certain thing or whatever. So like I said in previous weeks, there are just so many things out there about mental health and healing. I feel like our Instagrams always calibrate to what we're thinking about, so those are the kinds of things that I'm seeing. But I'm assuming that many people watching me maybe don't see those things, and so I feel like maybe I'm just an avenue for that for some people. And so I hope to open people's eyes to some of the tricks of the trade. So music, like I said, is one way that I have healed. One thing I wanted to talk about in the beginning today is called narrative therapy. So narrative therapy is something that I learned about in my master's program for psychology, but it's also something that I feel like I've been living. And the gist of narrative therapy is that you use your stories to heal, and you find ways to recreate your stories. So something I've been talking about in the last few weeks is the power of how we see our life, our day, our perception of our world, right? There's so much power in that, and there's a lot of power in our beliefs, and our beliefs usually drive how we see things. So if we come to believe that we're not smart enough, we're not good enough, we're not pretty enough, whatever, those things will affect the way that we see other people and the way that we see ourselves. Now, my belief is that you can change those things, but it does take time, and it takes a lot of work diving into who you are as a person in order to change beliefs, and there's a lot of fear that comes with that. So one theme I've been talking about is just this discomfort with change. And in my song last week, there's a few lines in there that say we're pushed harder and harder, and we're told louder and louder. And I believe that there are always signs in our life telling us that we need to make changes. And it's basically up to us to then take the responsibility to change those things. And I guess there's beauty in the fact that you don't have to. Like, you can know in your heart and in your mind that maybe you're not in a relationship you should be in, or you're in a job that you don't like and you need to leave. And the thing is that you don't have to at all. You get to choose your heart, which is something else I've talked about. Like, you can either choose to stay or you can choose to go, and both are equally difficult, because if you're in a space, you can hear it. Like, you can hear your mind telling you you're unhappy, or you can feel it in your body. You know when something's not right for you. But something I read is that sometimes it takes your body, I can't remember which comes first, but whichever comes first, if you think about it first, your body will catch up. And if you're feeling it first, then your mind will catch up. And it's just hard to find that mind-body connection sometimes. So that brings me to one tip that I used in my healing journey. What really got it started was getting into my body. So yoga was like kind of the healing technique that I used from the beginning, and without even really realizing it. I wasn't like conscious, oh, I'm going on a journey to heal my body and I'm going to do yoga and it's going to lead to X, Y, Z. What happened is I was diagnosed with lupus in 2013. It's an autoimmune disease. If you don't know what it is, it's like the opposite of AIDS. That's how I describe it, because AIDS is not having an immune system, and having something like lupus means your immune system is overactive and it almost like doesn't know what to do. So it's like, yo, I'm confused. I'm going to try and fight a cold off, and I'm going to give you a rash, etc. There's all these different complications. So back then, I was in college. I was doing a million different things, 4 different jobs. I was on the cheer team. I was swimming. I was working out a lot, and I wasn't very healthy. And what getting diagnosed with a physical illness did for me was it forced me to go on this path where I had to evaluate my habits, and I had to think about my relationship to my body and my body image. So these are cueing some things I've talked about in the last weeks. I've already mentioned that I've had an eating disorder in the past, and that I still struggle with those thoughts. So the first step to that was finding a way to move my body in a way that was more healthy than I think the way that many people do it, where they're going out to change their body. And that's not to say that if you like work out 5 days a week and you are really grinding and you're getting muscles and you have a six-pack, that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. But at least for me personally, I had to get past the desire to change my body and get into a space where movement was even more about my mental health than anything else. So like this morning, I went on a quick run, but I did not track how many miles I ran. I didn't even track how long I ran. I just ran this loop that I found in my neighborhood. And what I realized this morning is that I'm getting away from this need for like external validation. So it used to be back in college, before I found out I had lupus, I was writing down my calories every day, or I was working out for an hour or more every day, and it was always like I had to reach this next thing. And because there was always a next thing, there was no way to be satisfied. And so now I'm in this space where I guess I'm a little less fearful, because I think back then fear was what was driving me entirely. And I have a little segue because I just realized I did not announce why I'm wearing a hat. And I can see it in my eyeballs. So this is just a little spirit thing I'm going to do. I'm going to wear a different costume every week for the month of October. And obviously Halloween is all about fear, so that's a good reason to be talking about this too. But I believe that fear is like the main driving force for most people, and that's kind of a working theory that I have. I don't know if it's like, maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but it seems to me from observing my generation and the people around me that we are all driven by anxiety, which essentially is just fear, right? And so if fear is driving your every move, then just think about that for a second. Is that really how you want to be living your life? And I know that back when I was really in the thick of my eating disorder, I was driven by various fears, like fear of getting fat, fear of being ugly, fear of not being loved, all these things, and you can take it like even further and like really unfold like why you felt that way or whatever. And now I'm in a space where I do still fear those things, but not as much, and I'm able to kind of identify what it is that's driving me on any given moment. So I talked about, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I talked about kind of like how to deal with that when you do become aware of a feeling that you're having, and just being able to sit with it and asking yourself, like, is this really what I want to be driving my decisions right now? Do I want to be listening to that voice of fear? And you can do various exercises to begin to learn what your voices are. I remember mentioning this a couple times because I've really delved deeply into the various voices in my head to where I felt a little crazy. And when you end up getting to hear the starting song or the Mental Melodies theme song, you'll see that I mentioned that there are voices in my head. Everybody has voices in their head. It's not like always what you're thinking, but I think it's important to tune into those, because there are some voices that aren't really in your best interests, and it's because your brain soaks up everything in your entire life. So you might have a voice that sounds like your mom. Maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it's not a good thing, right? The people that you surround yourself with are going to affect the ways that your like subconscious mind talks to you. So back in, what month was it? I think it was January. I was doing this anxiety workshop because I was still a therapist, like literally only 6 months ago. It's crazy how things change. But I was doing this group. It was a group of like 6 women, and we met every single week, and we were talking about anxiety and how to overcome it, and how to be aware of it throughout your week and that sort of thing. And we did this exercise that I recommend all of you doing if you have some time, where you just sit down and write everything that's on your mind, and then go back and label it and try to see if you can like color code the different voices. Because what happens is when you sit down and you write everything that's going on, you're not usually speaking in one voice. Like if you watched me speak the last few weeks, a thought will pop up and I'll follow it, or another thought will pop up and I'll follow it. And it's like the me now that's speaking is not the one that's always speaking. And once you start to identify those, you can start to like put names to the voices. So you have your fear voice, and you have your guilt voice, and you have your ambition voice, or whatever, and you can start to decide which voice it is that you want to be the main narrative. So to wrap this up, my guilt voice is something that's been really strong, and I made a decision a few months ago to not let guilt motivate me at all. What happens when you make a decision, you then have to reaffirm that decision over and over again. And so I'll kind of talk about that struggle when I get back from this break.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century. Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century.
Hi, I'm Deacon T with Modern Word Ministries. It's great to be with you today. Just a short little promo for our show. Every Sunday morning we have service, and you can follow us at 10 a.m. Pacific Time on modernwordministries.org. And if you missed us or you want to see some of our older messages, go ahead and check us out on socialmediashows.com every single morning at 9 a.m. It's a great way to kick off your day, get a little bit of the word in you, get something uplifting, get you started off on your way. You know, if you're looking for prayer or you need some help, reach out to us. If you go to our website, again, that's modernwordministries.org, you can interact with me via telephone, via DM, text message, whatever you want. I'll get right back to you. So if you need prayer, you need help, you just need somebody to talk to, Modern Word Ministries is here for you. We are your church in the community. So until you see you next time, be blessed, everybody. Bye-bye.
Got Films is a full-service production company that provides motion picture quality content and production services for use in the film and TV industry. Looking for a seasoned crew, high-quality equipment, or other production services for your film, TV, commercial, corporate convention, sports, news, or interview project? Your search stops here. Some of our projects include NASCAR, American Restoration, Pawn Stars, Counting Cars, Top Chef, BattleBots, Forge and Fire, and Street Outlaws. We have also produced over 60 feature films and documentaries. We're ready for all your needs. Whatever your project, whatever your budget, big or small, Got Films got you. GotFilms.com.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media show.
Welcome back. This is our second segment of Mental Melodies. This is our fourth episode. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Carmynn Bradley. I'm going to pick up a little bit where I left off. So I was talking about guilt, and specifically guilt as a motivator. And this has been just a really, really key thing in my journey, so I feel it's important to share. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember I was really struggling and going back and forth. So this reminds me about something I said, I think, even back in the first episode. And I've talked with my director, Maria, about this a lot, where it's just like, how do you decide if you're going back and forth about something? And I've even been dealing with that this last week, but it becomes easier and easier, I think, once you start to just really think about that. So anyway, I was going through this period of time. I was like going to therapy, but all therapy was for me at that time was just kind of like talking about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, and then why I wanted to do the thing I didn't want to do, and why I also didn't want to do the thing I wanted to do. And it was just like a ping pong, and then I'm just left here like without making a decision at all. And so I had to kind of figure out, okay, well, what is it that's motivating me to do this thing, and what is it that's motivating me to do that thing? So if you make a decision like I did to say, I will not let any of my decisions be motivated by guilt, then you can immediately say no to something. And that sounds so easy. It isn't, because still, I think it's been about a year, and still 1 year later, I struggle with that. And it's because I'm one of those people that's very giving, and I've been kind of a yes man my entire life, and I've really, really learned that it's important to say no. And that's not a lesson that is very, very easy to learn. But when you're that kind of person, guilt is very strong, right? And people can make you feel guilty, right? Until you're in control over it. And then you realize, like, at the end of the day, they might be saying something that triggered this guilt, but I can decide whether or not I'm going to keep it. So I was talking about how I mentioned a tip last week where you can just kind of sit with your emotion and identify it. If I'm feeling guilty right now, it should be a no. It's not always, and I'm still learning. And I emphasize this in my second episode that, like, I'm here to be vulnerable and real with you and not to portray any kind of mental health perfection, because that is simply not the case. I'm on a journey that I believe has been valuable and will be valuable to other people. So when I'm thinking about, like, okay, how can people live like healthier, happier lives? I think, at least for today, the core of it is following emotions that are positive, right? Or things that you actually want to do. Don't do anything motivated by guilt. Don't do anything motivated by fear. And don't do anything motivated by regret, etc., etc., etc. And then if you start to identify what's motivating you and say no to those things, then that leaves room for love and excitement and ambition and purpose and your true path and your higher self and all of those great things, right? If you are, like, always following those other emotions, then I don't know, you're not going to be as happy as you could be. So I guess that brings me to kind of like the shift I had in my songwriting this week. So from last week, I was talking about sometimes being pushed and sometimes being told, and moving past all of those things, and like we force things that we don't want to force, and most of the times we shouldn't. It was just kind of this anthem of all of these different lessons. And then this week I was writing more about like a specific instant where I simply stayed too long and I wondered why. And I think that's kind of the lesson that's coming out of just talking about guilt and fear, is that it takes time to be able to make that decision more quickly. Like I was saying, it's definitely gotten easier where my back and forth is not as long now, and I can figure out what I want to do, or if inaction is actually the action I need to take. Like, you don't even have to do anything, but it takes time, and it definitely took like leaving my last relationship and realizing that like I should have left earlier and those sorts of things. And I think for a lot of people, I don't know, it can be really, really hard to leave something because you feel like you've wasted time, you know? And so I think I had to get to the point where it was like I started to let go of my past a lot more. And so instead of sitting with whatever negative feeling is motivating me to not leave, I had to acknowledge that like all that really matters is the present moment, and the past only matters when it can like teach you a lesson. I don't think my friend Shamel is listening, but if you are, I'm quoting The Lion King right now. I tell everybody that The Lion King is my Bible, but it's because of that two specific things, I guess. Remembering who you are and letting go of the past. Those are kind of like the two main lessons that I take from Lion King, and I think those are like the two most profound lessons that you can learn. Last week I mentioned a few books. I'm going to throw one out now. It's called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but The Power of Now. And it has some Christian references, so if that's the way you swing, it'll make a lot of sense to you. And if that's not the way you swing, but you grew up that way, it'll still make a lot of sense to you. And if it's not the way you swing and you didn't grow up that way, just take it for what it is. I think much of the Bible is like metaphorical anyway, so The Power of Now will pull some metaphors from that narrative in order to explain how important it is to be in the moment. I'm going to take a deep breath here, because what I'm thinking about is what I said earlier about all those thoughts like swimming in your mind. If you start to label them and identify those thoughts, you can tell when you're kind of like living in the past, literally, or living in the future. So some people will say like depression is living in the past, anxiety is living in the future. I think it's a little more complicated than that, but that is a good way to start to reference it if those are some struggles that you're having. So think about it. If you're depressed, and you're thinking about how sad you are that life is not the way you wanted it to be, or you're having even like post-traumatic stress disorder, you're having flashbacks from the past, or you're having a lot of regretful thoughts of like, I should have done this, I should have done that. Even on a minute level, like if you're a socially anxious person, you come home from a party and you're just thinking about all the things that you feel like you said wrong or did wrong, or you didn't wear the right underwear, so everybody was looking at you, or like your eyelashes were not great. All of these things are you like living in the past. And so if you start to identify them and notice the energy behind them, you can release that energy. So now I'm thinking about yoga and how I talked about that being kind of like the start to everything. Yoga teachers will actually instruct you on how to do these mental exercises. In a way, if you find the right yoga class, yoga can be like psychotherapy, but it just depends on the teacher. But essentially, when you are practicing yoga, you're focusing on your breath and you're focusing on how your body feels, and you're detaching from your thoughts. And so when I talk about like releasing the energy behind your thoughts, all I'm saying is that there is an emotion that's driving a thought. And when you can identify the emotion, then you get back to what I'm saying about guilt and regret and fear and all of that, right? So here's my thought. I notice my thought. Maybe right now you're in the space where you're so attached to your thoughts that it's even hard to notice them at all. So it's a practice. You have to sit back and breathe and notice where your body is. Here I am in this room. Here I am in this space. Now I see that I'm having thoughts, right? And I'm observing them. You can even turn them into birds in your mind or something. And what that does is it separates you from them. Okay, I am not the thought about the dress I wore that I shouldn't have worn, or the thing I said that I shouldn't have said. That's just a thought. If you label those, then what are they? I mean, they're not nice thoughts. Why is it that our brains have thoughts that are against us? I don't know, that's a theory for another day. But if you label it, it's usually attached to some kind of belief you had, right? Of, I don't know what it would be, but you have some kind of belief about how you're supposed to act in a social setting, or how you're supposed to act as a woman or a man, or even just like a neuro not divergent person, right? You have all these beliefs about what you're supposed to be, and those are driving those thoughts, right? Usually, now that I'm talking it out loud, those are anxious thoughts, right? They're driven by fear. I'm afraid people won't like me. I'm afraid I'm ugly. I'm afraid, right? Notice the thought, notice the feeling. Again, if fear is what's driving you, try your best to sit with that feeling and let it go. Maybe even replace it with something else. I don't want to be driven by fear. I want to be driven by love or acceptance or something like that. You have to make that decision over and over again, though. So I'm thinking about what I said earlier with the guilt. It wasn't like, oh, I made a decision not to be motivated by guilt, and then from then on, life was easy. I've been talking about intentions in the last few episodes, and how it's really about planting seeds. It takes a really long time, right? Like the literal act of planting a seed, watering the soil, packing the soil, making sure it gets enough sunlight is a whole process. It's not like the next night or even the next week. And the same thing happens when you're trying to change your mental processes. You could plant a seed one day, it might take 5 years for it to follow through. So I think about, like I was talking about my vision boards last week, and how in the year like 2019, I decided I wanted to find balance in my life. And now it's the year 2023, and I'm seeing that play out. And in the year 2020, I planted this seed where I was like, I'm going to follow through on things that I said I was going to do. And if it weren't for that year and that vision board and all the miles I ran and all the pages I wrote in 2020, I would not be capable of finishing a song a week right now, because I had to retrain my brain to believe that I could finish things. This was like a claim I made last week about ADHD, that I believe that ADHD is not something that has to rule your life. And I think that's a narrative that's coming out a little too much right now. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit after the break, just how you can actually retrain your brain and even like change the neurons in your brain to be able to work differently and more efficiently. So I'll see you in a few minutes.
It's a tough market. We get it. Home inventory is at an all-time low. It's a seller's market, and cash buyers have the advantage. Recently, cash buyers made up more than a quarter of all home purchases. But we have the solution. New American Funding's Buyer Accepted program allows your buyers to compete with all cash offers by becoming cash buyers themselves. Here's how it works. Buyer Accepted LLC, an affiliated company of New American Funding, will purchase your buyer's new home with cash and sell it back to them for the original purchase price, plus a fee that can be added to the purchase of the home once they secure mortgage financing with New American Funding. The best part is that they don't need to sell their current home first. This is a true cash offer. Clients who use our Buyer Accepted program can secure financing using a conventional loan and even VA. Plus, there are no fees for agents and no sacrificing commissions. Buyer Accepted even offers a free 1-hour certification course that will make you the expert. You want to close more deals and help more clients? New American Funding's Buyer Accepted program is the answer.
Vegas, here we come!
I can't believe we're all moving to Vegas.
I know, right? It's a dream come true.
Wow, super creepy dude.
Mason, stop. I think he heard you.
What if someone locked up in the back of his semi?
She's gone. Someone took her. Who's that creepy trucker?
What are you doing?
They call me Mother Trucker.
Las Vegas, here we come!
Welcome back to the third segment of this week's Mental Melodies episode. I keep saying it, but it's just so exciting to me. This is episode 4. I don't even know how that happened. It's like been almost a whole month already. I'm just gonna re-emphasize like how grateful I am to be here. Maria and I were just talking about like how beneficial it is for me personally to talk these things out, and so if it's helping you, that's even better, and I just appreciate you listening. So I was talking about ADHD, and I remember in the last couple of weeks I had made kind of a strong claim about how you can heal your brain. I think one day I would love if I have any people who work at like some place where you can do, I had planned like a whole thesis about this. I ended up not getting in. But I think I'm here instead, essentially, because I can talk through the project that I had planned. But like I said, I do believe my brain has changed from 2020 to now. I don't struggle as much with all of those things that people talk about with ADHD, where like their brain is all over the place, right? If it were, I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk for a whole hour about all of these things because I simply would be too overwhelmed by all of the thoughts going on in my head. So through those yogic practices I talked about where I was observing my thoughts, I've been able to literally slow my brain down. Also, and perhaps the most beneficial thing I think I've done to I'll say heal my ADHD, because I'm going to be that brave right now, is sitting with that very terrible feeling you have when a project is very overwhelming and seeing it through anyway. And a lot of it really is just overcoming that feeling, because we sit down to try and do a project, and now all of a sudden we're thinking about like the right way to do it and the perfect way. And this is just an example of all those voices popping in your head, right? Like if there's a voice of doubt coming in and making you think you can't do it because you can't start till you're ready, or you can't start till you have the perfect plan or whatever, that's just doubt. That's another one of those things that we can label and say like, I don't want to be motivated by doubt. I don't doubt myself. I believe in myself, right? So if healing ADHD is as simple as like not doubting yourself and not being motivated by all these different things, then why are we all struggling? But maybe it's because not everybody's figured out the answer, and maybe it's because we're all told that if we have ADHD, we have to be on Adderall, whatever. There's a lot of different reasons. I genuinely think there are forces out there that are also like trying to stifle our creativity. I believe most people who have either been diagnosed with ADHD or like have self-diagnosed, or they just identify with those various traits that people have, those are usually really, really creative people. And what we have to do is just kind of figure out what's important to us in the moment. So like in 2020, when I was saying, this is a need I have, I don't know why I know it, but I know it. I need to learn how to follow through on something. And so it was just about like getting up and doing it. I'm going to run this many miles a day, or I'm going to write this many words a day, or this many pages a day, etc. And I did that for a long time. And then that started to become more of who I am. So I made a commitment to myself after last week that I was going to write a song every week for the show. And no, I didn't have to follow through on that. That's something I've learned over the past few years too, is that like a lot of the things I've told myself to do, nobody was assigning them to me. And that's kind of the difficulty of like being a grown up with ADHD. When you're in school, you're told what to do, you're told when it's due and how much you have to do, et cetera, and you don't really have to think about it, and you just do it and you turn it in. And now later on, you're like, oh, I want to write a song, or I want to become a comedian, or I want to do this and I want to do that, but you don't exactly know how, so you don't start. And that's why you have to teach yourself these lessons about just following through. But another thing that's coming up is that, I think I mentioned this before too, but just there's that feeling of discomfort, like I can't start until I'm ready. And there is some validity to that. Like I didn't just become a singer-songwriter overnight. I started going to Don't Tell Mama, I've mentioned this place before, down on Fremont, and I just started going and singing and singing and singing until the younger part in me was like, wait a minute, this is who you've always wanted to be. And then I started meeting singer-songwriters and realizing that they were just people like me, and that at the end of the day, their degrees in fine arts or whatever they went to school for did not make them better than me. It just meant that they had more practice, and I knew that I could practice on my own. And that's something, thinking about that like structure of school versus like having to do it on your own is very hard. Like I am going out and getting a master's degree in music without the paper and without spending lots and lots of money, but using the knowledge that I have of getting multiple degrees to teach myself, and also I have plenty of teachers too. But to go through that process of learning and becoming a master at something without anybody assigning it to you is kind of scary, but also like empowering. And so essentially what I'm talking about is getting through, or getting past that, again, that fear of like, well, I'm not good enough, so I can't do it. So like a recap, I guess, of the various emotions I've been talking about that you don't want to motivate you. We have fear, we have doubt, we have guilt, we have regret. So in order to overcome those things, you have to start to learn about them and learn how often you're motivated by them. So like I mentioned, that guilt was a big one in the last year, because guilt comes up a lot in relationships, right? Because it's all about like how you interact with another person. And so if you're the type of person who's motivated by guilt every day, maybe that's the one you want to start with. Or if you're really, really anxious all the time, maybe fear is the one you want to start with. And this is, I guess, the other trick about ADHD that can be really, really hard, is that you kind of have to pick one thing. And that is scary. There's fear. If I pick this one thing, then I'm going to lose out on the other things. And that is a very valid fear. But really, like, it's a journey, and you almost have to trust, like, once you take that first step, that you'll be able to keep going. You have to take that first step, and you have to decide where to start. So I'm thinking back on, like, this thing I've talked about since the first episode of, like, if you're going back and forth, how do you decide? And that's not a very, very simple answer. For me, in the last few weeks, what I've decided is to focus on my music. There were a million different things I was trying to do. Like, I was auditioning for all these different film stuff, and I was going out and trying to do stand-up comedy, and I just started a couple of jobs, and I was working on this show, and I was really, really overwhelmed, and I could kind of feel that, like, that mental... I just picture all these different voices like going around, and that's something I'm talking a lot about today, is just like having all these different voices in your head, and it feels like each one is right sometimes. Like, this decision is right and this decision is right, and you can always validate it. But what I did is I started to really tune into, like, something even beyond me, and I started to notice what other people were saying to me and about me, not searching for external validation, but just noticing that there's, like, something, I don't know, something bigger than me, like, driving what it is I'm meant to do right now. And I decided in the last few weeks to focus on my music, which meant, like, sacrificing some of my social life and sacrificing this desire to be a really great comedian, and even sacrificing some of my desire to be an actress, which I do want to do. But if I'm doing all of those different things all at once, then I'm not mastering any of them. And essentially all I'm doing is I'm leaning into that fear and saying, like, well, I have to do all of them, because if I don't do them now, I'll never do them. But I've learned over the course of the last 5 years or so that obviously that isn't true, right? I started with running, and I started with writing, and then I moved forward, and then I started singing and all these different things. And right now, with focusing on my music, I'm able to sit down, start a song, and finish a song. Sit down, start a song, finish a song, move on to the next one. I wouldn't be able to do that had I not gone out and ran 5 miles and finished those 5 miles, or gone out and written those pages and finished those pages. But again, that fear is just so stifling. Like, it seems so silly, like, especially on the other end, like, oh, I made this decision and I'm seeing the fruits of my labor happen. But back then, like, it wasn't that easy of a decision to make. So I know some of the things I say are just simply, like, easier said than done type things. Or if you're sitting there and you do have, like, 6 different things in front of you and you can't pick which one to do, it's like, okay, well, how do I pick? And that's not simple. Like, that's part of the journey. I think for me, it came with also just learning how to organize my days and my months and my weeks. Like, I really did have to sit down and just start charting out, like, to-do lists every single day, and start to learn to let go of things that simply weren't important. And now my to-do lists are just not as overwhelming because I've learned that. But it's kind of like a tug and pull. One of my directors for another job I have has been helping me with my music, and he's talking about how music is like tension and release. And essentially that's like what life is about too. Like, you have these moments where you're pulled back and then you're pulled forward, and some moments where you feel like you're just like riding the wave, and other ones where you feel like you're fighting it. And I don't know where I'm going with that at all. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, like, that's like what the healing journey is like. Like, it's not, sometimes I talk about it and it sounds kind of easy. Like, I was telling my roommate about some stuff I did, and it simply has not been easy at all, but it's like that choosing your hard thing of like, am I going to choose to stay in the same spot, or am I going to choose to try and take a step forward and move forward and learn and grow? And with that are going to be a million different challenges. So if you're new to the healing journey and you're here with me every week, I just hope that at least tuning in with me every week will make it easier. I'm going to come back in a few minutes and I'll talk to you a little more, and then I'm going to sing you a song.
Hi, I'm Deacon T with Modern Word Ministries. It's great to be with you today. Just a short little promo for our show. Every Sunday.
Now on digital and DVD. Space Wars Quest for the Deep Star is an epic sci-fi adventure. An edge of your seat while tons of popcorn munching fun. 5 stars. A love letter to the sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s. With plenty of action and fun for all. You need to see it. You really do.
Captain just decided it's time to go.
I am ready for a sequel. Experience a bold new adventure. Space Wars Quest for the Deep Star.
Good old-fashioned adventure.
Now on digital and DVD. Now
Welcome back. This is the last segment of this week's Mental Melodies episode. I am your host, Carmynn Bradley. Once again, I'm just so grateful for you being here. Thank you for your eyes, your ears, and your time. I know that time is really, really valuable. So if you're sitting here listening to me week after week, I just really appreciate that. Definitely a lot of my heart and soul, most of my heart and soul is going into this project. I just really believe in the message that this show is portraying. I talk about it like it's separate from me. I don't know that it is, but sometimes it feels, I've talked about this, bigger than me a little bit, but I definitely feel like I'm a messenger for these things. And so I'm just going to kind of recap like what I talked about today, because I did jump over a little bit, like all over the place. So one of the main things I talked about was emotions and how they motivate you. And actually, Maria, my director, brought up a good point during the break that I think is very crucial to this point, which is that you, yes, should be able to identify these, we'll label them as negative emotions, guilt, regret, fear, etc., doubt. But what she mentioned was that it's not about saying, like, this is a bad emotion, therefore I'm not going to follow it. It's partially about using it to your advantage. So if you notice that you're afraid of something and you notice that that fear is stopping you, you can face that fear, right, and figure out how to move forward, or figure out how to like feel it, like I've mentioned today and last week. Like notice that feeling and be like, I'm really afraid of it because all of those following thoughts, right? Because it won't work out, because it means this, because that. Take all of those remaining thoughts and just sit with the fear and be like, all right, we're just going to go for it, and kind of like use the energy of that emotion to push yourself forward. And I think you can do that with all of these different things, right? You don't want to be motivated by doubt, but when you do notice that you're doubting yourself, take all of those thoughts that follow it, right? Like, I'm not good enough because X, Y, Z, and cross those out. Like, writing them down is even more valuable. It's about the intention, but if you can physically write down the thoughts that you're having and why you don't think you're good enough and literally cross them out or burn them, this will help to release, again, that energy I was talking about, where you can then step forward. I actually did that exercise for a few months, where every day I would wake up and any of the thoughts I was having, like, just sometimes you just wake up with all this nonsense in your head, and I would write them all down. And if they were ones I wanted to keep for that day, I would keep them like in my journal. And if I was noticing a lot of negative thoughts, I would identify what emotions they were, and I would literally burn that paper. And so it's like every day I'm committing to letting go of that energy. So I was talking about specifically guilt for me, but really guilt, doubt, and fear, I think, have been three like really big ones for me. I talked about how it wasn't easy. It wasn't like I just said, I'm not going to be motivated by these things anymore, and then voila, I was. It wasn't back in 2020, oh, I'm going to finish all of these things and that will help me finish things later in life. It wasn't. It was a struggle, like, to get up every day. But obviously it was really, really worth it. And you reap what you sow, as they say. So anyway, those are some exercises. I was talking about like burning the things every day. So I would wake up every day for months and do that. And it's not the same. It's not the same every day, year after year. It's like you have to kind of reevaluate where you are, you know? So I said, like, if you notice you're somebody who's really motivated by one thing, then focus on that right now, you know? And so that goes back to the other thing I was talking about with like healing ADHD and being able to finish projects. I want you to maybe think about, like, what are all the things that you have on your to-do list? Like, what are the million projects you have going on right now, and which one matters more? And that's going to be a deep journey for you to figure out, like, why it matters more, or what it means to you. But at the end of the day, like, if you do want to be somebody who completes projects and does what they say they're going to do, then you really do have to focus on one thing and learn all these different various lessons. So like for me right now, and focusing on my music, saying no is a lesson I've had to relearn, because that's something I've been through in the past. But like I said, it's always this tug and pull, this tension and release. Like, I can learn to say no for a few months and be really good at it, and then I'm focusing on something else, and eventually I realize I'm kind of slipping back into old habits, and so then I go and have to relearn those lessons and kind of like recommit to them. And I think that's something that's coming up today a lot, is just that, like, it really is a commitment, and it can feel like really daunting, and it can feel like a lot of work. And so, like I said, if you're kind of like on this healing journey with me and you feel like you're starting to move forward, I want to encourage you to take breaks. This whole journey of figuring out how to be aware of your habits and build new habits and become like the best version of yourself is a really, really long one. So be open to taking it slow, be open to taking it day by day, and really like moment at a time. I mentioned that book, The Power of Now. If you're interested in something to get you really motivated to be in that moment, I just really recommend that one. But if you're noticing that you are like not in the moment because you have a lot of depressive thoughts about the past, or anxious thoughts about the future, or those like analysis thoughts where you're judging who you are and what you say and all of that, the trick to becoming in the now without reading a whole book about it is to be in your body. So notice how you're feeling, notice where you are, and then go from there. I am going to shift into the musical portion of today's episode. This is a song I wrote called I'm Wondering Why. And I mentioned it earlier. Am I getting this hat? Yeah, it's about, you'll see. But it's about leaving that relationship and wondering why you stayed so long. And it's just really about kind of that like feeling of why. So anyway, here we go. I'm wondering, I'm running in, I'm kicking, screaming, and punching the walls. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm staying in, I know I should have left a long time ago. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm running in, I'm wondering, I'm screaming and I'm wondering why. I'm staying in, I'm crying in, I'm fighting for you when it's time to go. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm leaving in, I know I should have left a long time ago, and I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm lost in, I think I need to find me again, me again. I'm wondering, I'm leaving in, I'm wondering, and I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm lost in, I'm wondering when will I be fine again. And I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I'm staying in, I know I should have left a long time ago. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, I stayed in, I fought for you when it was time to go. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. I'm still wondering why. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate it. Yeah, so that one's called I'm Wondering Why. Hopefully that'll be out on Spotify soon. I'm really proud of this one. But anyway, if you are listening, like I said, I'm appreciative of you being here. I appreciate your eyes and your ears. Let me give you all these little shout outs. So if you want to sponsor this show and social media shows in general, all the work that Maria puts into all of us and all the work that I'm putting into this show, please email admin@socialmediashows.com. Be sure to follow all of those platforms. Social Media Shows TV is the Instagram. And then follow me as well, Carmynn Bradley, on Instagram and Facebook. I do have a little bit of a PSA. Hopefully this is okay. I am a single woman. If you are a TV director or producer and you hit me up on Facebook and you tell me you want me to be in your movies, but all you really want to do is date me, I'm going to give a public service announcement to a blanket no to all of you. Please direct business requests to me, of course, but I am not interested in dating people in hopes that they put me in a movie. Thank you. Please follow my Instagram. I'm going to be working on a website here soon. Just keep watching the show. Keep sharing the show. If you have questions about all the stuff that I'm talking about, you can reach out to me on those platforms or email me also, CarmynnBradley@gmail.com. And I will see you next week.